On today's video, we're going to be learning about the beautiful state of Georgia, a state that's divided. On top of that, it's in the crappy Deep South region. Everyone loves the northern half of this state with beautiful mountains, diverse cities, and a highway hub to the United States. But the southern tip of Georgia is a huge question mark. The state of Georgia is so different that it could easily be two particular states. However, the state of Georgia is one. As different as the southern part of the state may be to the northern part of the state, Georgia is one. On today's video, we're going to identify the differences economically, racially, culturally, and geographically that shape this beautiful state into two very diverse regions that are different and unique in their own ways. In the heart of northern Georgia is the city of Atlanta, a highway and distribution hub for the United States. Interstate 75 heading south connects into the state of Florida, large cities like Tampa, Orlando, and Jacksonville. To the north, Interstate 75 connects it to Chattanooga and thus into Nashville. 85 to the south connects to Interstate 75, connecting the city of Montgomery, Alabama, and Mobile, which is a port city. Interstate 20 to the west connects to Birmingham, Alabama, which is another highway hub city, with major cargo airports like Louisville and Memphis in this direction. Further to the southwest along 65 is also New Orleans, a major port city. Highway 20 towards northeast connects Atlanta to Greenville and Charlotte, two very important economical centers. Towards the southeast, Atlanta is also connected to the port cities of Savannah, Charleston, South Carolina, and Jacksonville as well. Some of the most important centers of the Sun Belt are found in this region: Charlotte, Atlanta, Greenville, and Huntsville, Alabama. And northern Georgia sits conveniently located at the heart of a highway hub that connects the east coast of the United States, the center of the country's population. So we can see that geographically, Georgia is located in a very precise location for advanced highway systems, economic growth, prosperity, and of course, this makes Georgia a powerful player economically, not only in the United States, but also on a global level. Atlanta is the sixth largest metropolitan area in the United States, home to over 6.3 million people. So while the city of Atlanta by population isn't one of the largest cities in the country, as a metropolitan, it is the sixth largest in the United States. This is a large urban area, a sprawling urban area connected by a highway hub. Atlanta is also a distribution hub for drugs across North America. Astonishing amounts of seizures in the city and large stash houses have revealed that Atlanta is also a hub not only for commerce, but also for criminal activity. The city of Atlanta has become a hub for criminal organizations. Crime here has become organized and sophisticated, running everything from car theft to scams, as well as drug distribution. The city of Atlanta continues to deal with the fact that its highway hub, which made it an economical powerhouse, has also made the city ideal for criminal organizations, and crime here has become very sophisticated and entrenched in the culture of the city. The state of Georgia, ethnicity-wise, could almost be considered three different regions. The northern half predominantly white, the area around Atlanta and the center of the state having a large African American population, and the southern coastal region being somewhat of a mix. Atlanta sits at the heart of the Black Belt. The Black Belt originally refers to the dirt of the region, which was a key factor to this region having a large African American population due to the days of slavery. The Black Belt, however, is also an impoverished and crime-ridden region. Many states in the South have refused to invest in this region, and today the area has some of the most dangerous cities in the United States, highest rates of poverty. These predominantly black areas and white states in the South that are known for racism, areas that have been purposely underfunded by their states to hold down the population. Atlanta sits at the heart of the Black Belt. However, Atlanta is also a black economical hub, And just like the states in the South have deprived their cities like Montgomery, Jackson, and Memphis. In the state of Georgia, the complete opposite has happened. It is Atlanta, which has received the regional prosperity. On top of that, it is predominantly a black city. However, when you dive deeper into the economy of Georgia and in the city of Atlanta in particular, you will notice some things that still show that no matter how good things are in Atlanta for the African American community, it is still part of the Deep South. When you look at Atlanta in a racial or ethnic map, you'll notice that despite the heart of Atlanta being African American, the northern half of the city is predominantly an urban white area, and there is a pocket of diversity, orange being Hispanic and red being Asian, stretching along Buford Highway all the way up to Gainesville, Georgia. Focusing on just the city of Atlanta, you'll notice a stark difference where the dark greens contrast with the dark blues. The southern half of the city being predominantly African American, divided by a straight, consistent line of segregation. Despite Atlanta being known as a hub for African American commerce, the city is still heavily segregated. Divided only by downtown Atlanta, on the north side you have an affluent white area. Real estate prices here going into the millions. However, on the south side of downtown, things deteriorate quickly. These inner city areas are heavily African American, and you can see the contrast between how the predominantly white parts of Atlanta city limits are living and how the black areas of Atlanta are living. On one side, a rundown and dangerous African American area. The city's downtown and highways acting as a barrier separating the poverty and crime on one side from the opulence and wealth on the other side. In the suburbs of Atlanta, where land is more spread out, fast-growing suburbs seem to be less ethnically polarizing, more diverse, and welcoming to people of all shades. Second only to Houston, Texas, the northeast region of Atlanta is the most diverse area in the entire South. Along Buford Highway, stretching northeast out of Atlanta, sprawling suburbs attract people from many nationalities. And here you have one of the most ethnically diverse regions in the entire country, but particularly only Houston has more diversity than this part of Atlanta when it comes to the South. The evening after this video was filmed, off of Buford Highway, an armed man attacked randomly Asian businesses, making national and world headlines, showing that Atlanta is still in the state of Georgia, a state plagued with the hate of the South. This man's random attack on Asian businesses made headlines throughout the entire world and reminded the Hispanic and Asian communities living here in the Atlanta metro area that despite the fact they have large communities and established businesses in this area, they're still not wanted in the Deep South. And the Deep South remains a place that is unwelcoming, hostile, and dangerous to Hispanics. Over the last year, just an hour and 20 minutes southwest of Atlanta in Montgomery, Alabama, Hispanic businesses have been onslaught after onslaught of criminal waves, with 3 Hispanics being killed at Los Hermanos grocery store in Montgomery, Alabama, just off of Highway 20. Just a month after these homicides, the business was robbed once again, with the robbers taking off with a fund that was for the victims' families. This just goes to show how cruel the South has become, and many of the Hispanic and Asian communities living in Atlanta are many times in fear. Attacks like this have become normal. The perpetrators usually being African American gangs, acting under the notion that the white law enforcement is hesitant to investigate crimes if the victim is Asian or Hispanic. In particular, in the southwest area of Atlanta, heading towards the Alabama border, is an area that has Kia and Hyundai auto manufacturing. Many Korean engineers live in this area, and they have to be very careful exactly on where they live, many of them commuting hours back and forth from work to make sure that they're not living in a dangerous area. In particular, the Korean community has received a lot of the onslaught of the hate because they are, after all, producing Korean vehicles in the United States. Instead of appreciating the fact that these communities are bringing manufacturing jobs jobs to the South, an area that's economically deprived and needs these investments. The people in this area are doing everything they can to make the lives of these people that are coming to the United States to bring jobs to America as miserable as possible. Many times the employees purposely sabotage the parts to harm the owners, the manufacturers of these vehicles. And many of the extensive defects that we have seen with many of these vehicles is not that the vehicle engineering isn't correct, it's that many people within the actual companies are purposely sabotaging the products to harm the parent companies that are Asian. Well, I've never lived in the state of Georgia. I did live about an hour from the Georgia border when I lived in Alabama, and I've worked in Georgia quite a bit while living in this area. And many of the people that I encountered in this area of Atlanta would outright tell you how much hate and contempt they have for the Asians, despite the fact that they're only there to bring jobs to the United States. So while there are pockets of diversity around the outskirts of Atlanta, it hasn't come without a battle. Dalton, Georgia. Moving north out of Atlanta, we encounter this city that is 50% Hispanic. The Hispanic community here has created a beautiful town. While in the southern region of Georgia, towns are falling to crap and empty and vacant, this little town is thriving, surrounded by beautiful mountains. Many of the carpet companies that were here initially brought a large percentage of Latinos to the area, and now Dalton has a larger Hispanic population than any other ethnicity, comprising about 55% of the city's population. It is here that the Georgia-grown title, derogatory term of carpetbagger, was born in reference to the Hispanics that come to Georgia to work. This offensive term was coined by the locals to offend the migrants who came to work at the carpet factories, which is the reason why this region of Georgia today is a beautiful and growing city. These industries and the hardworking families that came for the jobs that the American citizens would not do has produced, despite low incomes, one of the nicest towns to live in Georgia. This town is thriving, small businesses are moving, houses are not abandoned, and it is difficult to find a bad neighborhood in Dalton, Georgia. For the most part, Dalton, Georgia is one of the nicest towns in the entire state, thanks to the industries that attracted the immigrants and the hardworking families that here in the heart of northern Georgia have created a home for themselves. Dalton, Georgia is one of the best places to live in the entire state, with a population comprised of 50% Latinos and continuing to grow at a faster rate than any other segment of the population. Dalton, Georgia is a prime example of what happens when you allow migrant communities to grow and to thrive. Without a doubt, this region of Georgia is the most scenic. Driving north, we finally end the state of Georgia and start the state of Tennessee. This northern tip of Georgia, the mountainous region, is where people dream about one day having a cabin. Gorgeous, beautiful. This area of Georgia is one of the most beautiful scenic places along the entire east coast of the United States. The Chattanooga metropolitan area stretches into the northern tip of Georgia, and it is here where Georgia ends and Tennessee starts that the great American highways continue into larger cities like Chattanooga and Nashville that, despite being distant, contribute to the factor that Georgia is a distribution hub. It's these highways that connect one state to the next that give Georgia its economic power. We leave the prosperous northern half of the state and find ourselves in the deep south. While prosperity has been a notable feature in the northern half of the state, here in the dirty south, the southern region of Georgia, poverty reigns king. Here in the dirty south, no suburbs are sprawling, no immigrant communities are flocking to this area. Only the ghosts of the past continue to haunt the future of this impoverished region known as the Deep South. Cities here are losing population, homes are abandoned, and businesses are boarded up. This region has no future. The ghost of the past, the history of slavery, the economical hardships that this region faces still haunt this area. leaving the Deep South an area of misery. It's noteworthy that these plagues are not just unique to the state of Georgia, but affect South Carolina, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and all of the other states that share or take part in this region known as the Black Belt or the Deep South. As this miserable region stretches across the south of the United States, it doesn't matter what state boundaries you are within. It's almost like you leave the state of Georgia and enter the Deep South. The cities here have some of the highest homicide rates of anywhere in the United States, and the state of Georgia is not immune from the effects of this region. All of the states that consist of this region are dealing with the same exact problems. Take homicides. Jackson, Mississippi has a homicide rate 4 times higher than Chicago, Illinois. Birmingham, Alabama has had a homicide rate 4 times higher than Chicago, Illinois. Montgomery, Alabama's homicide rate 2 times higher than Chicago, Illinois. Crime, murder, poverty, if it's bad, it's in abundance in this region. While a line of prosperity goes from Huntsville to Atlanta to Charlotte of growth, a line of poverty and misery just south of that also parallels. And it's interesting that despite the highways moving through this region, despite the fact this area enjoys some of the warmest, nicest weather of anywhere in the United States, these cities are dying. Interestingly, just to the north of Georgia, Alabama, and all of the states we've mentioned, the northern half of these southern states are doing well. It's the southern half of these states that are really struggling. Georgia is also home to strong weather events. Georgia is not exempt from being part of the tornado alley, and in particular, the southern and western edge of Georgia are home to horrible storms. While these acts of nature are powerful and awe-inspiring at times, with thunderstorms and many inches of rain coming down in a very short period of time, sometimes the aftermath of these storms is catastrophic. Like the event of West Point, Georgia in 2023, a tornado destroyed this small town on the border with Alabama. This is the region that has the auto manufacturing. In the South, tornadoes can wipe out entire towns. Places that took hundreds of years to build can be destroyed instantly with a tornado. Entire towns have been destroyed in this region of Georgia, and it's just another aspect of life in the South, that at any moment a tornado could come and leave your town in ruins. We did a video driving tour for our channel of Newnan, Georgia. Right after we did the video, the town was hit directly by a tornado, and many of the people in this town were grateful that my video was a way for them to remember the way their town was before the tornado destroyed it. And thus, another aspect of life in the South is the notion that at any moment a tornado could destroy your entire town. Sometimes the destruction can be repaired, other times it completely wipes towns off the map. An aspect of living in this region of the country is not knowing if tomorrow your town will exist. And perhaps that plays a role into the careless attitude of people in the South. You'll notice that people here don't take care of their properties too much. They seem to be very laid back, and they don't seem to chase materialism like people in other parts of the country. Perhaps the tornadoes and the notion that after all everything can be gone in an instant doesn't really make a lot of sense to invest too much into a place that everything can just be gone instantly. And perhaps this is also another reason why this area hasn't received a lot of substantial investments, because it can all be gone in an instant. Perhaps the tornadoes and weather plays a role into why this region of the country doesn't get any outside investment. Not only are the people hostile, but so is the weather, and any investment made here could be gone instantly. In a heartbeat, everything could be gone. So it doesn't make sense to make too much investment in a region of the country where things can just instantly be destroyed. Moving further south towards the Florida border, a lot of red clay and peanut production. Me, personally, I'm allergic to peanuts, so I really don't care too much for these little critters. But a lot of people enjoy peanuts, and this is where they come from, the red clay of South Georgia. Small towns near the Florida border like Moultrie, Georgia, are now 5% Cuban. Many people from South Florida looking for affordability have moved into the southern region of Georgia. And as far as St. Mary's, Georgia, right on the coast of the water, to Moultrie, Georgia, right along Interstate 75. Some of these small rural communities in South Georgia are benefiting from the influx of people from South Florida that are buying homes and investing, starting businesses in a region of the country that really desperately needs it. Many people who moved here came to work overnight at the chicken plants. While these aren't exactly the best paying jobs, if you have limited skill sets and limited English, you can work at these chicken plants and make enough to live in these small towns. It's the affordability of this region that makes it attractive for people leaving the state of Florida. However, jobs are difficult and pay very little. Despite all those challenges, Moultrie, Georgia now has a growing and thriving Latino community representing people leaving South Florida. This has created a small microeconomy in the town of Moultrie, Georgia, as other families continue to move here, starting businesses and contributing to the economy of Moultrie, Georgia. Perhaps Moultrie, Georgia could one day be like Dalton, Georgia. While many of the towns in South Georgia are falling to crap, abandoned and decrepit, there are places like Moultrie where a little bit of hope is coming in. But some of these towns in southern Georgia have so many problems that even if they're welcoming to outsiders, outsiders don't want to end up in these places. Take the town of Columbus, Georgia, right on the border with Alabama. The homicide rate here is about 3 times the national average. Crime and gangs are out of control, and despite the fact the town has a strong military presence and affordability, great weather, people still are afraid to move to this town for its violent reputation. The situation is even far worse in Albany, Georgia. Despite the affordability of this town, not even that can attract people to this gang and crime-ridden town. Interesting fact, the hip-hop duo Field Mob is from Albany, Georgia, and the state of Georgia has considerably influenced not just U.S. culture, but also global urban culture. Georgia was at the heart of the early 2000s hip-hop movement, which influenced the urban cultures not only of the United States, but of the entire world. In Atlanta and the surrounding areas, college towns and rural communities have significantly influenced hip-hop culture, making it known as the heart of urban hip-hop culture. So Georgia has contributed vastly to the identity of African American culture, and particularly related to urban music and, of course, culture, pop. Georgia has contributed heavily to this entire subculture of urban African American that is now spread through the entire world. From Africa, Europe, and Asia, the styles and influences of Georgia are visible throughout this entire subculture globally. Gwinnett County, in the outskirts of Atlanta, also, despite being a suburban county, has influenced hip-hop culture tremendously, with rap groups like the Migos being from here and many others claiming to be from here just to get a taste of that ATL notoriety. Cordell, Georgia, a small little town in southern Georgia. Here, everything seems to be lacking taste, lacking flavor. And that's the interesting thing about Georgia. Some of these places are so boring and so out of the way that they completely lack any cultural identity, while other parts are just bursting with their own personal influences. The weird thing about Georgia is that it is on one hand quite a boring and unappealing state, but on the other hand, it also has little touches of identity that are so strong that they carry on into other subcultures globally. And that is the state of Georgia. Perhaps you've never visited this state or you've never lived in this state, but when you turn on your radio or you go to your closet and pick out something to wear, there may be some touches and influences that originated here in the state of Georgia, a state that has carved out its own image, its own identity that is so remarkable that throughout the entire world, touches of its aesthetics are mimicked throughout the entire world. A state that has come far in promoting the culture of African Americans and exporting its styles and music globally, but also a state that has fought back changes. Culturally, Georgia is an influential power, shaping the culture, the music, and the styles of generations to come. However, within the state of Georgia, the people that reside here that come to Georgia to carve out their own slice of the American dream are many times faced with challenges in an unwelcoming environment. However, that has not stopped these people from creating their own slice of Georgia with their own personal background. And while the state continues to give the world its culture and its identity, the state is also fighting within itself. Advancements in the South have been difficult to come along. In the past, the agony and pains of the African Americans that were enslaved. Today, many times people say it's actually the African Americans who are the most racially repugnant and most oppressive within the state of Georgia, forcing new immigrant groups like Latinos and Asians to live in fear. But with its beautiful and important highway hubs, many people who love the American highway will tell you that the highways of Atlanta are the most beautiful in the United States, and it is one of the most beautiful urban landscapes to behold. The congestion of Atlanta, while maybe a nightmare to the locals, is awe-inspiring to the visitors to see so many people in Georgia's majestic urban settings. It's difficult to tell where the urban setting ends and the natural scenery begins, but in Georgia, both are beautiful. Particularly in the mountainous northern region of the state, the natural scenic beauty of Georgia, the tales of American highways, some of the most beautiful and scenic places seen anywhere in America. This is the beautiful state of Georgia, a state that has carved out a section of its own identity in the South, a region that's polarizing and fights back identity. Georgia has fought in the South to create its own staple, its own identity, its own flavor, a flavor that today is known throughout the entire world. This is the state of Georgia, where farmers have tried to carve out a living in rural Georgia. Today, many of these rural areas are suffering to hold on. The hardworking farmers and country people of Georgia face unparalleled economical difficulties in a region of the country that has been lacking investment for a very long time. When one part of the state thrives, the other part of the state continues to fight to slice out its own piece of living in a very challenging Deep South.